In today's video, I want to show you just a quick little update that we rolled out into the Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin. This is for managing podcasts, especially if you have multiple users accessing your WordPress website. And maybe you have a team of people who are just editors for your podcast, or maybe you have somebody who is dedicated to the management of the overall settings of a podcast. We rolled out 2 new user roles that are built into WordPress. You can see right here, Podcast Editor and Podcast Manager. I just want to show you what the differences are when you enable those on a given user on your WordPress website. Now, one big caveat here is it only works with Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin podcast custom post types. So as long as you're using the podcast episodes, or you're creating episodes under podcast all episodes, so all of these episodes here are what's known as custom post types. They're all part of Seriously Simple Podcasting. If you're using this, then you're good to go. If you're using your podcast episodes or creating podcast episodes on blog posts or other custom post types, what I'll show you today won't work out of the box unless you have a developer who could customize it for you. But we're not going to cover that today. Okay, let me show you what it looks like. We're going to switch to this user first, and this user has the podcast editor role. Remember, there's only 2, Podcast Editor and Podcast Manager. We're going to click on Switch To, and that should effectively switch my user to the Podcast Editor. Now, a keen eye will notice that all of the settings, all of the options I have on the admin bar are gone, except for, well, almost all of them, except for the podcast admin. And then when we click on all episodes, I do have access to all of the episodes. So as the podcast editor, I can go in, I can upload episodes, I can create new episodes, I can modify existing episodes or past published episodes. I have all that control down to the individual podcast level. Okay, now we'll switch back to that user and give myself the Podcast Manager role. Update user. Give that a second there, and then switch back to the user. And now, when we hover over podcast, with the new Podcast Manager role assigned to this user account, I have all of the other settings and options within Seriously Simple Podcasting to manage the entirety of the podcast. So if I wanted to change player settings, feed details, hosting, and do all of the real nitty-gritty of setting up a podcast and have that access, you give that user the Podcast Manager role. Again, Podcast Manager, Podcast Editor. The editor only has access to the individual episodes, and the manager has access to everything. Create a new podcast, create a new series, all of that stuff when you have the manager role. Okay, that's it. 2 new user roles for Seriously Simple Podcasting if you're outsourcing the management of your podcast, or even within your own team and organization. This is a great way to do that. Only works on the custom post types. So that's the only caveat you should know. Okay, that's it. Thumbs up if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want more. See you in the next video.